use cases of Web3 through DePIN.
This episode is sponsored by your network, free VPN for everyone who participates. Hello everyone, Daniel from DePIN Hub here. Today we're interviewing Trevor from Render Network, a decentralized compute platform that started by powering Hollywood-grade rendering, evolving into one of the most important DePIN networks for AI and GPU workloads, and recently migrated from their own chain to the Solana to scale globally. And let's dive in. Thanks so much for joining, Trevor. It's a pleasure having you here. I've been, following Render for many years. I think before like the previous cycle, 2017 maybe. It's been a long time you guys been building. But yeah, let's start by you introduce yourself, your role at Render Networks, and how did you personally got involved into this world?
Fantastic. Well, hey, Daniel, thank you so much for having me here today. It's really cool to connect with you and to be able to talk about Render. So I'm Trevor Harries Jones from the Render Network. I'm actually on the Render Network Foundation board, and then I'm COO of OTOY, the for-profit entity that founded the Render Network. And the Render Network is one of the earliest and largest DePIN projects. We connect unused GPUs from home computers and data centers to creators and studios across the globe in order to power real Hollywood productions, large-scale displays like the Sphere in Las Vegas, concerts, games, and now AI. To date, we've rendered more than, I think, 63 million frames on the network, including works like Westworld, Silo, and the Peripheral TV series. So, a broadly used platform that's really focused at motion graphics. And from my side, I was lucky enough to be introduced to Jules in 2021. I was just coming out of being the CEO of a separate SaaS software company. And, Jules was really struggling at that time to scale the SaaS side of OTOY. So I came on board, and it was really an initial meeting of minds. And I thought most of my focus would be on OTOY. But, as I arrived and got to understand the power of the Render Network, I was really drawn in, and more it became a central focus of what I did. I helped establish the foundation and, hired the initial team who've taken off and done an amazing job, and have watched us go from a utility token that was really part of the initial 2017-18 ICO circuit to being a decentralized platform with multiple products on the network and multiple use cases, and really becoming part of a large global community. So it was an amazing transition from that initial stage to really dipping my toe into crypto to now living fully natively crypto for almost 5 years.
Amazing. Yeah, I think for me as well, I've been in crypto for a long time. I think, 13 years more or less, or more. But it was only because the last 5 years that I decided to go full time into crypto. I like this idea of DePIN. And I've been following Render since almost the beginning, I guess, at least as I remember. For the listeners, can you explain what kind of problem is Render trying to solve? Because, how does the industry work right now, and how is different from what you guys are building?
At its most basic, the problem we've always been trying to solve is a problem we had ourselves. OTOY is first and foremost a 3D animation software company. And, so we've been focused on creating tools to help people create Hollywood level type productions from their desktop. And, the challenge with rendering is it's a complex process. It's really the calculation of light bouncing back and forth to give you back an image, a photorealistic picture. And because that takes power, it's really been the impetus for a lot of what we've done. Rendering started as actually being done on the CPU. And Jules was one of the initial pioneers to push that it could be done on the GPU, and that could be done more efficiently there. And not surprisingly, it was significantly more efficiently because it was able to do things in parallel as opposed to in series. And that really kicked off, an industry on the rendering GPU side. Early stage, he partnered with NVIDIA and helped really frame chipset design from where it started to where it is today, where it actually has dedicated ray tracing hardware on the actual chip. So, we've been involved from the start, and, as we've improved the product set and Moore's law has kept up making better and better GPUs, we thought we'd always get there. But the bigger challenge has been we've gone from grainy images, to better images, to video, to 4K video, to now 3D and spatial and even larger structures like the sphere. And every one of those jumps takes a jump in rendering power. So even though we've been doing really well on the hardware side, we just haven't been able to keep up. And if you chat to a motion graphics artist, typically the idea always was, they would put a scene together, and then to render it would take time. It's almost like, you'd press enter and go and get a cup of coffee and come back, or go and sleep, to see what your output was. So, given how important the work is they're doing and the need for iteration, we've spent a lot of time trying to help scale this and network this. And our initial forays were actually into the centralized space. OTOY partnered with Microsoft, with Google, and with Amazon to try and scale rendering in the centralized cloud. But NVIDIA's pricing model on the enterprise side was very different back then, and it just didn't make a ton of sense in terms of scalability. So there weren't a lot of enterprise level GPUs when we started pushing at this. And we were working with one of our investors, a company called Madison Square Garden, and we were trying to help them get something up on the Garden big screen. And Jules was doing the calc of how long the rendering would take, and realized it would take more than all of Amazon's available GPU compute to deliver this rendering in the time frame. So it was really an aha moment of, wow, we've got to do this differently. Jules had always had a patent out there. He has a number of patents, and one of them was for a SETI at home, contribute your own home compute to help. And the crystal moment was really that Madison Square Garden moment where he was like, wow, this isn't going to work in centralized. We're going to have to go decentralized. So, he stepped back and really invested in building out a framework that would allow the render network to become this decentralized network where, you're able to send a different frame to different nodes across the globe, and therefore get the job done in parallel in a way that just wasn't possible elsewhere. So, at its core, it was just us solving a problem from our side that really needed to be solved. But over and above that, when we chatted to our users, the motion graphics artists who were trying to build these amazing works, we realized they were actually the folks who owned the GPUs that most closely matched what we needed across the globe. And so it wasn't just to solve on the rendering side, but it was also a means of helping those motion graphics artists. Because as we put the network together, what we realized is they could actually earn on the idle time of their home computers. And in doing so, really use them as a battery to then generate, revenues that they could then use towards works on the render network. So it was really driven out of almost a two-sided need, trying to help the motion graphics artists who really are our tribe and our core. And then second, just trying to be able to render faster and faster. And, even today with, 5090s and better, we're still seeing a massive need for distributed rendering. And, we only expect that to grow.
Yeah, I don't think that's ever going to stop, right? I think the more the chipsets gets faster and faster, our demand gets higher, the quality goes up as well. That requires, it's always battling in the amount of resources necessary. I'd like to just point to the one thing that you mentioned about the set at home or fold at home. That was I like to think that it's like one of the first decentralized infrastructure in terms of compute out there. I was running this I'm not super old. I'm 38 right now, but I remember as a kid running that on my computer, my parents' computer, and super cool to be able to see the future. Universities getting together to using all their idle resources to process.
Well, we all scaled through Napster and through other decentralized projects, and it was really full circle for me to see Napster as a crypto project again. Really cool, to look back at all these pioneers who helped move from sort of centralized workflows to decentralized distributed workflows.
Exactly, like torrenting. Forget about the bad side of those things. To think about the infrastructure that was built Of course, I only download Linux through torrent. That's the only thing I use torrent for, obviously. But it's really cool the way that these things work. And then I guess you guys figuring out that this is the solution to actually, put parallel into the processing for GPUs. When I'm rendering, how can you explain a little bit how it works on the back end when someone tries to render like a video? Each computer or each GPU gets one frame and then it goes a lot in parallel.
Yeah, so if you think about a movie, when you're watching a Hollywood movie, it's filmed at frames per second. Those are still images. 24 frames per second is the Hollywood standard. So, that they're 24 in a second. If you multiply that out by 60 and however many minutes in the movie, you get a fair number of frames that need to be rendered. And, what the render network does so well is it's able to actually stream out the software required, as well as the assets to do the rendering, all to a node in a secure way, such that the node never actually stores what is being rendered on that node. The render network has an allocation model that essentially top-down allocates to performant nodes over time. As a user of the network, you get the fastest renders from the fastest available nodes. And essentially, those nodes do those jobs in parallel. So frame by frame, if they're finished, they get sent another frame in a way that efficiently renders a large video, as opposed to you sitting on your home computer and waiting for each frame to render one after the other. And, it's an extremely efficient way. It's a way that needed to be done in that streaming way to protect motion graphics artists. When you think about these folks, this is really their core work and their need. If you're a film producer or, an NFT artist or any type of user of the network, you don't want to have somebody be able to steal an aspect of your work. You definitely don't want the blockbuster leaking at any point too early. And so, the idea of being able to stream it, never have them store it, is really a key part of it, of being able to trust a decentralized network and to have 63 million plus frames that have been run on the network over time really shows it's something that works. It's something that provides speed and affordability to those motion graphics artists across the world. And on the flip side, provides them a means of contributing in the gig economy, kind of like the Airbnb and Uber side, that you can contribute that idle GPU and actually turn it into an asset, as opposed to it just being a sunk cost.
When did you or Render Network decided to become a crypto project, or like a DP nowadays? Because set at home existed, but it's not, there's nobody making money. It was all by kudos. Then there was this shift.
Yeah, so very much at the time of the inception of the network, when Jules was struggling with that scalability issue for Madison Square Garden, we were also looking outside. And at that point, Ethereum had really become a thing. And there were a number of Ethereum miners out there. And so it opened up our interest to crypto. And as we looked at crypto, there were a couple of things that stood out to us. One, and probably most importantly, we wanted to show a means of provenance or creation for a motion graphics artist. We believe that, being able to prove that you actually created something is a very important asset and drives significantly more value than just, an NFT that was a link to a JPEG. Being able to actually show the frames associated with what you did on chain provides a level of value that we believed was really necessary. But also looking forward to this, beyond this, we could see we were going to start moving towards a world of AI. Being able to prove who created, whether it was you or generated via a prompt, is really important. And above and beyond that, opens up avenues towards royalty streams and licensing and on-chain revenues that just aren't available without using a blockchain. And then for us also just the efficiency of managing a decentralized network and having a centralized token to drive that made a ton of sense when you have thousands of people across the globe all contributing their compute. So I would say those two drivers were really the primary for why, why use the blockchain. And, for us, as things have evolved from rendering to both rendering and AI, we really believe that choice is going to turn out to have been the right one.
Yeah, I mean, you have the resources, right? Like GPUs right now, right? So important for AI processing as well. But I would like to definitely talk about AI part. But before, I just wanted to talk about the change from you have your own chain or like Ethereum based, and then moving to Solana, right? I think I was Breakpoint in Amsterdam. I think it was a big announcement. I was there. I was like in the crowd lurking. What was the process like to change this to why Solana and what benefits did it bring to the project?
Yeah. So, what's really great about this is it was probably the first real community proposal that we had. So it was really at a great point in transition where we'd gone from, the ICO and the utility token into this decentralized model. And so it was contentious, and it was one that had the most participation from the community. What I can say drove a lot of the decisions when I talked to folks in the community were a number of things. First, we'd started on Ethereum, and right early in, we came across gas issues. When you're paying $15 of gas fees, right, and the average rendering transaction is $7, it doesn't scale. You can't pay a credit card fee more than double the actual transaction cost and get away with the working. So, that was an obvious first blocker. What we did to solve that was we actually moved on to layer 2 to Matic, to Polygon, and for a period that worked for us. But really, where we're going in terms of throughput and scale, we needed a solution that was multiples less cost per transaction than we were on layer 2. So that was one of the drivers, very much so. Another one was the Rust aspect of it. We've seen typically everything done on the GPU has been C++ or CUDA, but Rust is definitely emerging in the field, and there's a lot more of an overlap there in terms of available resources. And for us, the Solana ecosystem had a number of DePIN players in it already that had really paved the way for us to simply follow and to leverage some of the open source items they had to quickly switch over to Solana. So I think, really threefold across those three were principal drivers. And I can say we've been extremely happy with the choice. The community's been amazing. The technology has only improved on the Solana front, and it really has positioned us well for our next growth period here as we look forward as a network.
Join the movement to create a better alternative to VPN that is free for people who contribute. Privacy is a human right, and we're on a mission to give everyone great privacy tools. Goodbye VPN, hello your network. 100% open source client and server builds. Launched in 2025 on Android and iOS, over 200,000 people have joined the Your Network. Some have called it the best VPN ever created. The network spans over 100 countries, 3,000 cities, and has zero known security or safety incidents. Windows and Chrome are coming soon. Your node is also a great way to participate in the network. Not only is a great personal network device, but it will max out your reliability score and unlock the network reliability bonus, earning you more. Go ahead to shop.ur.io and get your device right now. Yeah, I see Solana is definitely one of the biggest players in the decentralized infrastructure right now. So many big companies, right? Like Helium, which is the grandparents, I guess, of DePIN now. I mean, even though you guys been on the crypto side longer than Helium, because they only launched their own token on 2019, but they've been, kind of plowing through the idea of decentralized infrastructure. Then a lot of other projects came after that. Then the name DePIN came. And then we're here in the DePIN Hub podcast, right? Can you talk about a little bit of the economics of the render network? How do people pay for it? If I'm a creator, I want to use it, etc. Who can actually give their hardware to be rented out, for example?
So a couple of things. If you're a motion graphics artist, we want to make it really simple, right? So we price the service in fiat. It's actually in euros, and it's really priced on a relative energy usage. So the benchmark we use is called Octane Bench, and essentially it's a a benchmark of what a standard scene would take in terms of time to therefore to render, to therefore get to a relative benchmark that we then price by the hour. And it's quite simple. As an artist, you're used to rendering a frame locally, seeing how long that takes, and being able to then sort of use that for your Octane bench calc. Also, once you've done a couple of these, you realize, in most cases, the price points are pretty small per frame, so that's looking back to why Solana, the throughput is so important for us. So from an artist perspective, you don't even know you're actually touching a crypto project or a project that runs on crypto rails. And that's really important to us because we wanted to abstract all the complexity. But for us, it's a flywheel, right? Because by getting them in and using this really simple, fast, affordable service, the idea is really to help introduce them to the ecosystem and hopefully for them to become, node operators over time. The node operator today, and I'm just going to talk on the rendering side because we haven't gone into the AI side, but that's really targeted at NVIDIA GPUs that run on Windows PCs. And those are the typical rigs for everybody who's involved in motion graphics. That's a fairly standard setup, and there's an abundance of those consumer nodes across the globe that motion graphics artists use on a daily basis. So that's the target. In terms of can you just join? What we do is we help try and manage supply and demand such that we don't have an overabundance of supply on the network. And so we have a wait list, and we do throttle it. We let on more folks last year, but really it's supply and demand. As we keep scaling up the network, we bring on additional nodes, and so we really welcome anyone with an applicable rig to apply, join the waitlist, and at some point hope to see them on the Render network. Over and above that, then we do have a new compute subnet. And when we talk AI, I can sort of talk about that because that's more readily and available and open to join, particularly for folks in the US, which is sort of at an earlier stage there. But definitely no barrier to entry on the artist side when you want to use the network. Really, what's important is this is a technical thing. It's probably not a you and me thing, just showing up and try and render something. You've got to go through a pretty detailed creative process using a DCC like Blender or like Cinema 4D, and only then do you get to the rendering stage. But once you're immersed in the ecosystem and you are a motion graphics artist, services like the Render network are invaluable to actually driving, getting out the output you just cannot do from home.
Yeah, and you guys have this massive network of GPU providers everywhere. When did it come to the idea, okay, actually we can get into the AI world now, because this is like there's a massive demand for processing, for inference, for training. We already have the infrastructure. So what's the next steps for you guys now?
What's crazy about it, the AI world is how early we are in this journey. I think it's just on 2 years since Stable Diffusion was released. So it's just a very, very short time frame in where all this goes. But from an artist perspective, OTOY has already been using AI for years in the rendering process. It's always been integrated where it could be to help make the process of building easier. There's a process at the end of the render called denoising that essentially cleans up some of the render, and that uses AI naturally in the workflow without anyone knowing. So it's always been there. We've always been on that edge of really trying to solve for motion graphics artists. And the aha moment was very much when Stable Diffusion came out, when Midjourney came out after that, and we started seeing some of our customers use these tools and see value in these tools in their workflows. And being motion graphics artist centric, we were worried, wanting to only run libraries that were trained correctly and that didn't steal the artwork of our customers, but we watched the wave grow. Very clearly it was going to be a second very large commercial use case, or third commercial use case for the GPU. So we watched it with a lot of intent. And I would say initially it was pretty centralized. And that made sense if you're in the AI industry. Everything AI has been about, getting the chips closer and closer to each other and the memory closer. And, you look at these massive data centers, it's really a great engineering feat on its own to get that level of compute co-located and next to each other and running at the efficiencies they are now. So that was the focus of the industry for a significant period. And so it made sense that when AI initially came out, that would be a centralized undertaking. But, as that's evolved, I think a couple of things have come to mind. One, there's a very centralized training need. But once you get past the training and then go on to running these models, which is called inference, it doesn't require anything like the footprint you do to train. And in many ways, a lot of the inference is actually better suited to different architectures from that very centralized approach. And you see GPUs out there that are already made just for inference. And you also see them sort of better suited to general purpose GPUs like those in all the consumer nodes that we have across the world on the render network. So it was sort of an evolution of going from training to inference. And the crazy thing is most of the AI work that happens is actually inference, not training. So the inference need is probably much larger. Then second, we're just scaling at a ridiculous rate on the centralized side. When you look at the US, AI is a central US asset, and you've got billions, hundreds of billions going into these data centers, and you're coming up against production problems on the GPU side as well as on the power side, right? It just doesn't make sense, centralized power-wise to do all this. So, looking at where it's just grown and all the energy that's gone into it, I think data center construction exceeds commercial real estate construction in the US this year, right? So you're at this inflection point where so much money is going into it. For us, decentralized can help alleviate all of the burdens on power. It can help some of the bottlenecks around production. So it really makes a ton of sense, but only where it fits. And I'd say that the third pillar that really changed things is when you look to how China, went about addressing AI, and projects like DeepMind. No, sorry, not DeepMind. DeepSeek, sorry, where they trained in a significantly more efficient manner. And what that meant was training could be done on much less performant GPUs. And so we started to see a real push towards training being this absolutely centralized large data center issue to more and more actually being possible on distributed nodes. And there are a lot of projects now that are testing, how to do this, how to do actual training on decentralized first enterprise nodes and leading more and more into consumer nodes. And I think where we're seeing it going is, there will really not be much of a difference. It will be more like edge compute and being able to leverage nearby edge compute, be it locally on your hard drive, be it on a network where those nodes are somewhere closer, or on a centralized basis, will really come down to something that is managed by your needs and your the job you're trying to run. If it's something that doesn't have an immediate time need, like I need an image back now, or I'm trading something, decentralized can significantly reduce the cost. It can reduce the burden on some of the centralized items, and frankly, makes a ton of sense given the shortage we have of enterprise GPUs across the globe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the decentralized infrastructure on AI and also robotics, I think it's something that's going to become more and more common. Everybody's in a few years, let's say 5-10 years, going to have a robot at home. The robot has going to have some very powerful GPUs, maybe some ASICs, some GPUs that are very focused on some specific tasks. But if the robot is not doing anything, the same way like your car is just parked, plugged in, the electric car, it's idle resources that should be used, right? Energy is going to be an issue going forward with AI. So I think electric cars more and more is going to become batteries for that as well. So I hope we develop things fast enough in order to be able to utilize and not have a problem with energy problem that's probably going to happen soon. What are your strategy as a render network now with AI? You're going to be focused more on the inference side of thing initially, or just going to be, build a lot of tool sets for people to build on top of that? What are you planning?
So at its most basic, the render network is a compute network, right? It's a network of idle GPUs, and I think that persists. That's the core. Whether we're going to be doing rendering work on it or AI jobs on it, we're really targeting that community, right? Now, some of our partners are doing some really interesting things. And, OTOY being our initial founder is the one I'll talk about first, but there are a couple of others here. OTOY, while focusing on, the motion graphics artists and their software set, have realized they really need to integrate more of these tools to simplify the workflow for a motion graphics artist. So a lot of what you were doing historically was quite manual in motion graphics. And any points where you can help speed that up, where you can keep control in the hands of that artist, but you can actually, help them generate what they're trying to do in a more efficient, either cost way or speed way, I think is a viable path for a motion graphics artist. And so quite excited. Yesterday, the OTOY folks announced OTOY Studio, which is an AI focused set of tools for motion graphics artists. And it has, a number of AI models that it's using that are really exciting. And, why we're excited at the Render Network is they have, hundreds of different models that are available in this product. But some of the models include models that can be run locally on render GPUs. And so we're looking to them as a partner to offload some of the costs that they would, today incur through API from third parties, to be able to push those down to decentralized nodes as a real use case of how to better use decentralized nodes. And what I love about that is it's continuation of the motion graphics tribe that we really stand for. So it makes a ton of sense that they're taking the lead on that front and moving in that direction. What I'm seeing in the actual tool set is really interesting. You've had this movement where you've seen the introduction of neural objects, NeRFs, and then those morph into the next phase of objects called Gaussian splats. And splats are really, really interesting to us because they seem to be the bridge between AI and traditional rendering. And as I watch what OTOY is doing in their tool set, it's pretty exciting to me because I see a blur between the traditional rendering flow and AI flow, such that you're almost not going to know as a motion graphics artist or care whether a piece is rendered or whether it's AI, as long as it's achieving the control and the real output that you're looking for. And what I'm really excited is that I believe that both of those types of scenarios will have jobs that are running on the Render network. Sure, there'll be some things that are done by closed models, but in many instances, they can be done by these open source, smaller models that can be decentralized and hosted on nodes. So you're going to see just a merger or a blur between those. That's really exciting. Over and above that, we've got a couple of launch partners who are actively integrating with our compute network, and they have similar but different use cases that show a need for decentralized nodes on the AI side. So I don't know, which is going to win in the future, because I think a lot of this comes down to what the artist is trying to produce and the cost on either side. It may cost more or less to do things different ways. But what I do see is a growing need for the usage of GPUs. And I don't think that will ever stop.
The white list that you guys have on probably gonna, fade away in the near future because there's so much demand with AI. The demand is so much higher than just for rendering, which is not a small thing to begin with. That the demand's going to be there. You don't need to worry about the supply anymore. The render network right now, especially on the supply side, is very US centric, right? Do you have any plans to expand that globally? How is that going?
Yeah, I mean, so the compute network, we've started just in the US, because the initial partners that we had as our launch partners had shown a demand for local US compute. As we expand the compute network, I'm expecting partners across the globe and therefore nodes across the globe. On the actual users of the rendering side, the render subnet, it's global. And there are nodes across the globe and motion graphics artists across the globe who use it. So the restriction on the US side is really just for the launch of the compute subnet aspect. And on that side, it's just because we're launching, and I expect that to change in short order.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It's always better to have a control environment to launch first and see where it breaks, and then you can fix that and then actually release the Kraken.
These are important tools for folks making real money, commercially on a daily basis. So that they need to run at a production level.
If you have like this crystal ball, how would you see, render growing over the next 3 to 5 to 10 years with this rendering plus AI plus everything else?
Well, I like to look at it more as what are the use cases? Where are we going on that front? And I don't know if you know this about Render Network, but we're very Star Trek centric. A lot of this goes back to Jules' best friend being Gene Roddenberry's son, and so growing up in the Star Trek household, and so we've always sort of had this target at getting to the holodeck. It's been front and center, and it's great to check in on that and sort of see where we're going. For us, quite recently, the last year on AI has been insane. We've gone from 6 fingers on a hand to world models now that are pretty impressive on a real-time basis and potentially will run on single consumer GPUs. So, we're excited at what that means to, an immersive experience. And immersive has been a key word for the last year. You saw things like the Sphere, and we did our Art Tech House sponsorship that was really cool in New York. I'd really recommend anyone see that. Even before that, we were involved in all of the VR displays, so Oculus and more recently, on the Apple front. But they're somewhat hardware restricted. And I would say the progress has been more on the software side the last year, where we've made really tangible strides towards getting closer and closer to real-time rendering, getting closer and closer to world models, getting closer and closer to 3D object generation. So I can see that progressing at an absolutely rapid pace, and us being able to experience, at least on the software side, a holodeck type experience where it's real time, it's dynamic, and it changes in the not too distant future. The unfortunate thing on the hardware side is it's been slower. And so I don't think we're going to be able to walk into a room and it change and us feel like we're experiencing something in the holodeck way. But that will come. There's amazing technology out there that we've been involved with. It's just a question of time. But I think, probably the 3 to 5 year window for me is more about software. It's more about a 3D internet and an immersive internet around that, and maybe some interim glasses devices or other things that sort of help us get there. Bridging towards a more native immersive type feeling. But I believe it's going to all need GPUs to burn. And that's why we're so excited about, the community and where we think it will grow.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love the idea of render network. Actually, the name will almost not make total sense to, everything that you guys can be building. This idea that the GPU, or not only GPU, but some sort of processing is never going to stop, is only going to grow, and the demand's going to skyrocket, I think, in the future. And you guys can be the backbone of everything that's happening, right? Working so many different areas, so many different angles. I love it. I think it's a project that definitely everyone should be paying attention and following up closely, because You guys are in the forefront of a lot of this decentralized infrastructure on that front. Do you have any final thoughts or things you'd like to share to our community? Last things that I forgot to ask that you think is important to share? And where can people learn more about Render Network?
So I'm a huge fan of DePIN. You know, being one of the OG projects here, I've really gone deep into the ecosystem, and I honestly want to tell everyone, I think you should look into DePIN projects as a whole and see how you can contribute. I think they're amazing that, you know, they really reduce the barrier to entry so that in many ways everyone can participate, you know, in a way that was just not possible with decentralized data centers before. So, you know, I really recommend everyone go out there and try it, and love what you're doing here on the podcast side to try and get the word out there. You know, to learn about the Render Network or contribute to it, go to the Render Foundation website, renderfoundation.com. There are links everywhere there, whether you're on the artist side or the node operator side, or you know, other contributors to the ecosystem. That's really our central hub, as is, you know, X and Telegram. But you know, really, it's all about jumping in and contributing, using these services, and yeah, trying to become part of the growing gig economy that is DePIN.
Yeah, it's the gig economy 2.0 powered by blockchain, right? Well, thanks so much for joining the podcast, Trevor. It was a pleasure talking to you after so many years following what you guys are building. It's a pleasure to have you here on the DePIN Hub podcast, and actually hope to have you again in the future to talk about all the cool things with AI that you're building. Yeah, just want to say thank you and see you guys soon.
Amazing. Thanks, Daniel.